Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar that is held by Miles Partnership and Wheel the World. The webinar is about accessible travel, especially reaching travelers with evolving needs. This is hopefully first of many webinars that we are doing together. We started a partnership between Wheel the World and Miles Partnership that has invested in Wheel the World in their last round of funding, and we started finding ways on collaborating on how to make travel more accessible and destinations more accessible.
Well, it's great to see everyone. I'm August Erickson. I'm the Director of Development Services here at Miles Partnership, and I oversee our in-house team of digital accessibility specialists.
And I'm Alvaro Silberstein. I'm CEO and co-founder of Wheel the World.
So I want to go over a quick agenda for today's webinar. We're going to start by discussing what an aging demographic actually means for DMOs. We'll then dive into how to make your own channels accessible to users of all ages and all abilities. Alvaro will then discuss conveying accessibility across digital channels. He'll then review how to tell your accessibility story authentically. And finally, we will leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A.
Before we jump into the conversation and the presentation, we want to share with you a video that we generated with Wheel the World at Wheel the World a long time ago, sharing why we do what we do and why accessible travel is important.
If you want, we can talk about what led us to use wheels instead of legs. That way, we can tell you the sad version and version 2.0, which is even sadder. Or if you'd rather, we could do it like the movies, and we'll embellish everything with a tearful story of effort and determination. But there's something we have to tell you. We're not superheroes. We didn't feel like them when we climbed to over 2,430 meters above sea level, or in the most beautiful and incredible places in the world. Unlike superheroes, we thought the same thing anyone would. We felt grateful to be there because it made us understand several things. But before we start to tell you, could you please change the music? Because there in Machu Picchu, we realized that despite everything, this is not a cheap imitation of life. This is not a copy or a simulation. This is not a lake that longs with all its heart to be the sea. This, my friends, is life. Life at its fullest. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Believe us, we are saying this for every tear shed, for every person hugged. In flickering neon lights with fireworks lighting up the sky, life. Pack your bags, recover the ability to wonder. Open your heart and let it explore. But even then, you won't be prepared for this, because we are not inviting you to travel. We're inviting you to live.
That is such a fantastic video. So the slides from today's webinar and additional resources will be available on both the Miles Partnership website as well as the Wheel the World website after this webinar. So in order to talk about what an aging or evolving demographic means for DMOs, let's start by diving into that demographic itself. So I want to go over some key findings from the State of the American Traveler, which is a quarterly research report conducted between Miles Partnership and future partners. So this study started back in 2022 and is focusing on gathering insights from American travelers. And in this circumstance, travelers is defined as adults who have taken at least one trip, so 50 miles or more from home, in the past 2 years. In total, 4,000 completed surveys are collected on a monthly basis. And for this presentation, I'll be focusing on the key findings from 2025. So the Boomer Plus traveler segment is defined as any individual born before 1964. The Boomer Plus demographic makes up 23.5% of the total US population. And finally, 11.4% of the Boomer Plus traveler segment reports having accessibility needs, with mobility and physical impairments being the most common need reported. So the Boomer Plus Traveler segment is planning on taking an average of 3.8 leisure trips over the next 12 months. They are actively exploring new destinations. Additionally, they're anticipating to spend an average of $6,379 on leisure travel over the next 12 months. So that includes airfare, accommodations, and all other trip-related spending. And finally, speaking of accommodations, they are more likely to stay in a hotel versus all other travelers, which helps directly fund DMOs. Additionally, the Boomer Plus Traveler segment, they are actually less likely to utilize online or utilize travel agents and prefer to conduct their own research and make their own bookings, which speaks to the importance of having information geared towards this traveler segment on your official DMO websites. Speaking of which, 45.2% of the Boomer Plus Traveler segment reports utilizing official DMO resources to plan their travel, which is obviously fantastic news. And finally, just as a fun bit of information, over half of the Boomer Plus Traveler segment lists visiting historical sites as their top travel passion. So if you're looking for new content ideas, specifically for the Boomer Plus Traveler segment, content geared or centered around historical sites is a fantastic place to start. So let's pivot here slightly and talk about how to make your own channels accessible, again, to users of all ages and all abilities. And this is where digital accessibility comes in. So trying to boil down a really rather complex subject matter into just a few sentences, but ultimately digital accessibility is a process of ensuring digital products, primarily websites, are accessible to those with disabilities. So at a very high level, this entails continuous analysis of those digital products to remove any digital barriers detected. There are four very important acronyms in the realm of digital accessibility, which I'll be using throughout this portion of today's webinar. The first of which is ALLY, A11Y, stands for accessibility, but more specifically, digital accessibility. And it's kind of just a cheeky shorthand as there's 11 letters between A and Y in the word accessibility. UX stands for user experience, ultimately how a user feels when interacting with digital products. So your website, social platforms, etc., and the thought process of prioritizing user needs over everything else. Then we have the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act. And finally, we have WCAG, WCAG, which stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. What a flawless transition to this next slide, just absolutely crushing it already. What exactly are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? They are internationally recognized guidelines published and maintained by the W3C, which is a nonprofit organization formed to establish standards for the World Wide Web. So WCAG outlines specific success criteria, which are designed to remove digital barriers for individuals with disabilities and ensure digital content can be analyzed by assistive technologies. And we'll dive a little bit more into assistive technologies in just a few slides. Additionally, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are referenced in both existing federal and state legislation. In short, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are the gold standard of digital accessibility and should be the blueprint you follow as your organization engages in digital accessibility efforts. Assistive technologies, jumped ahead. Assistive technologies, on the other hand, are any technology used by individuals with disabilities in order to perform functions that may otherwise be difficult or even impossible. So there's a wide array of assistive technologies, but some examples include screen readers, which announce text and images to users who are blind or visually impaired, screen magnifiers, which drastically magnify web content for users who have limited vision, and then speech input devices, which allow users with limited mobility to perform functions through voice commands. So believe it or not, every single person on this webinar has more experience with assistive technologies than they probably realize. So if you've ever increased the zoom in your browser by engaging the little magnifying glass icon with the plus sign, you've actually used a browser-based screen magnifier. And if you've ever used Siri on your iPhone, I'm sure we all have, you've actually utilized a speech input device. So while you may not need these assistive technologies to utilize the internet, you have interacted with them before. So going back to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the current version of WCAG is 2.2, which was finalized by the W3C in October of 2023. Just a fun fact, the first version of WCAG, WCAG 1.0, was introduced all the way back in 1999. So these have been standards that have been in existence for quite an extended period of time. New versions of WCAG are introduced over time to address the ever-changing nature of the internet. So each version of WCAG is ultimately built on top of previous versions, meaning historical efforts to conform to WCAG 2.1 or even 2.0 are still beneficial despite WCAG 2.2 being the latest version. So as an example of each version being built on top of previous versions, WCAG 2.2 introduced 9 new success criteria, which were not outlined for WCAG 2.1. Each version of WCAG outlines 3 separate conformance levels. There's level A, which is the absolute minimum level of conformance, level AA, which includes all level A and AA success criteria and is by far the most widely utilized conformance level. And then we have level AAA, which is the highest possible level and includes all level A, AA, and AAA success criteria. I do want to note that the W3C does not recommend that level AAA conformance be required as a general policy, as it is not possible to satisfy all level AAA success criteria for some content. With that being said, I recommend your organizations aim to meet WCAG 2.2 AA conformance. So not only is digital accessibility the right thing to do in the sense that it's altruistic and ensures everyone can utilize your organization's websites with minimal barriers, but it also has substantial SEO benefits. So SEO, or search engine optimization, is a process of ensuring your website is easy to find on search engines like Google. So while there's several examples of this symbiotic relationship between digital accessibility and SEO, let's start by looking at alternative or alt text for images. So alt text describes what is depicted in an image, so users relying on screen readers can understand how an image relates to page content. Without alt text, screen readers just simply announce image or graphic, which clearly does not provide the necessary context to those users relying on screen readers. So let's look at a quick example of alt text. This is an image of my coworker Ben, and proper alt text for this image would be something along the lines of "man laughs with friends while working on his laptop at a coffee shop." So not only is alt text for images a requirement for WCAG 2.2 AA conformance, it also allows search engines to properly index images using the alt text itself as the keywords. So what we alluded to in that past slide, referencing the additional benefits of digital accessibility, is the curb cut effect. And it's one of my favorite things in the world to talk about. It's the phenomenon when something designed to benefit those with disabilities ends up benefiting the general population as a whole. So the name comes from those curb cuts you see in sidewalks nationwide, originally designed to benefit wheelchair users, however, are utilized and appreciated by bicyclists, joggers, parents with strollers, etc. Ultimately, by prioritizing digital accessibility, you're creating a better user experience for all. Another great example of the curb cut effect in all of our day-to-day lives is captions or subtitles. So originally intended for users who are deaf, who are experiencing hearing loss, however, are clearly utilized and appreciated by a far larger audience. In fact, I read something recently that according to Netflix, 85% of their subscribers watch video content with subtitles on. So given the importance of alt text for both digital accessibility and SEO purposes, I did want to quickly go over some best practices for alt text. So alt text should be concise and descriptive. So remember that the alt text provided is going to be read aloud by screen readers. So incredibly long alt text will lead to a subpar user experience, as the user will have to sit here or sit there and actually read that full screen reader announcement. But on the other hand, alt text which is too short and not descriptive enough will not provide the adequate contrast or context to users relying on screen readers. So ultimately, alt text should be just long enough to effectively describe the image, and you should aim for less than 125 characters. It's also unnecessary to include image of or photo of within the alt text itself, as screen readers will already recognize the file as an image and convey that to the user. If your image contains important text like signs, menus, promotional graphics, or even captions, include that visible text in the alt text. This is especially important for marketing materials, flyers, whatever it may be, as well as memes. Additionally, be specific with locations and names within the alt text. For example, rather than providing, alt text that says aerial view of a river, provide something that's more descriptive like aerial view of the Potomac River. And finally, alt text is a fantastic opportunity to use AI, but AI generated alt text should always be reviewed manually. Building upon that point above, AI sometimes lacks the ability to be specific with locations and names, and that's vital information we want to include in the alt text. I do want to note that alt text also extends beyond just websites, and the vast majority of social media platforms support alt text. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, X, formerly Twitter, etc. With that being said, you should absolutely take the time to provide alt text for the images you post on your social media accounts. So Facebook and Instagram, both meta companies, do automatically generate alt text for images via AI. But again, make sure that you actually review this manually to ensure accuracy and then modify or tweak as needed. Beyond alt text, another way to ensure your owned channels are accessible is to add captions to video-based content. So both YouTube and Vimeo support automatic captionings for videos, which utilizes AI to write the captions themselves. Really fantastic tool. But once you've engaged that automatic captioning, I highly encourage you to review the captions provided and make edits to ensure proper punctuation is utilized. Because frequently AI generated captions will miss periods, commas, and capitalization for proper nouns. So I want to pivot here again slightly and talk about accessibility widgets, as they're an incredibly hot topic right now within our industry. So this is an example of an accessibility widget. I'm sure you've seen these widgets on a wide array of websites. They typically show as like a little accessibility icon, which floats in the bottom left-hand or right-hand corner of your screen. And accessibility widgets claim to provide some degree of assistive technologies or additional functionalities for users with disabilities directly on your website. And I get it. Like at face value, I can totally understand how people can think installing a widget like this on your website would be helpful to those with disabilities. However, unfortunately, this is not the case at all, as these widgets actually clash with users' default assistive technologies. So let's think about this, right? If you're a user who relies on a screen reader, you already have a screen reader installed on your desktop. You're not hoping the websites you visit have a widget that includes a screen reader functionality. A great analogy I heard at an accessibility conference recently is a user's default assistive technologies paired with the assistive technologies offered by accessibility widgets is like wearing two pairs of glasses at the same time. There's bound to be disruption that will lead to a negative and/or incomplete user experience. Additionally, these widgets do not resolve all existing accessibility issues at the code level, meaning WCAG violations can still be present on your website despite having a widget deployed. Ultimately, despite their claims, no widget can magically make your website accessible, and your organization should always focus on resolving accessibility issues natively. So how exactly do you resolve accessibility issues natively? You work with your current web provider, internal digital team, or a third-party provider to analyze your website to detect accessibility issues related to the WCAG 2.2 AA6S criteria. And you do that through a combination of automated scans and then in-depth manual user testing. You should then conduct prioritized remediations to resolve the most critical barriers first. It's important to recognize that digital accessibility is a process and not a project. Modern websites are incredibly dynamic, with new content being added, existing content being modified, and third-party integrations being added or updated. Additionally, accessibility guidelines evolve over time. Again, WCAG 1.0 came out in 1999. WCAG 2.2 just came out in 2023. With that being said, digital accessibility should always be viewed as an ongoing initiative. It is always best to address new accessibility issues as they arise to continue to facilitate the best user experience possible for users of all ages and all abilities. With that being said, Alvaro, I'll pass the mic over to you to discuss conveying accessibility across digital channels.
Thank you, August. Great content, great presentation about digital accessibility. Now we are going to talk more about physical accessibility and how this physical accessibility information needs to live across digital channels. Before we jump into the content, I would love to briefly share what's Wheel the World. At Wheel the World, and because mainly part of the next sessions are lived because of the data that we have collected through the work that we do at Wheel the World. Our mission is to make travel accessible for people with disabilities, their families, and older adults. And we are doing it by helping destinations and hospitality businesses to verify, market, and improve their accessibility. Our model involves two different business models supporting each other. On one side, we have wheeltheworld.com, that is for people with disabilities and their families to book hotels and experiences with all the accessibility details they need. And on the other side, we have Wheel the World Accessibility Verified. That is an all-in-one solution for destinations and hospitality businesses to verify, improve, and market their accessibility. We've been working with more than 140 destinations, verifying more than 5,000 hospitality businesses. And through wheeltheworld.com, we have made more than 30,000 people book trips with all the accessibility they need. And if you talk about accessible travel, there's 13 million US travelers with disabilities that they take at least one trip a year. They are taking 38 million trips annually, normally with more companions than the rest of the travelers of the industry. And they are spending 25 billion in annual travel, only considering their individual costs. 74% of those trips have encountered obstacles during the trips, mainly based on having not enough information and having bad experiences regarding not understanding in detail what was that accessibility. We can consider that the global accessible travel market today is around $120 billion. And the question is this market increasing, growing, or not growing? And the answer to that question is that it is growing mainly based on aging population. The aging population is projected to increase the number of people living with disabilities globally from 1.3 billion today to 2 billion. And this is mainly because the global population aged 65 over time will grow from 750 million to 2 billion in the world. So this market will continue to grow and it will continue to become a larger opportunity for the tourism industry. And we can see that in our experience with wheeltheworld.com, the segment of people that are 65 years or older represents the largest segment in our community of more than 180,000 people that represents the community of wheeltheworld.com. 27% of this community is on this segment. And if we only consider the people who have booked trips through wheeltheworld.com, this segment represents 37%. So we are more relevant actually making people travel for this segment, and it's even more representative in our audience. We can see that also in a experience that we had on a project that we did with one of our clients, that is Travel Oregon. We work with Travel Oregon to make Oregon the first verified state by Wheel the World. We have verified more than 400 hotels, restaurants, and attractions. They're getting detailed information of accessibility. And we did a marketing campaign showcasing different content creators of different ages on the different regions of Oregon, showing in videos their experiences traveling. This was a very successful campaign, and the results also were suggesting that the main audience that requests accessibility are older adults. 65% of views of all the content and engagement were people over 60 years or older, and they had 3 times more a higher conversion rate versus younger age groups. Even the content that we generated was across all ages. This segment and this audience was the one that was more engaged with the content and with the campaign that we generated with Travel Oregon. So with this context, we can say that the accessible travel market is no longer a niche market. It's a growing market. Actually, it's the largest a segment that is growing in travel based on aging population that makes people require more accessibility. And if we consider also the companions of the people with disabilities that travels, makes this market even larger. At willtheworld.com, 40% of the signups are not made by the people who have disabilities, but actually their companions who are planning their trips for themselves and also for their loved ones that have disabilities. You can prove this by yourself. You're most probably from the destination and hospitality industry. You travel a lot to conference or to travel individually. Look what happens in airports. You will see many people requiring disability assistance requests, many wheelchairs around. Actually, airlines reported 30% annual growth in disability assistance requests. To make this clear, this is not only wheelchair requirements, this is requirements for all type of disabilities and assistance across the airline and airport experience. So how destinations and their partners should take action on this current trend in the travel industry? People with disabilities from different ages, and especially older adults, they need the same thing and they want the same thing. They want to reduce the uncertainty when planning and having their trips, and they want more peace of mind. And how we can make this into action? First is to avoid generic statements. Saying that something is accessible or not accessible, the reality is it doesn't mean much because every person have different accessibility needs. Someone who is blind has totally different needs for someone who is deaf or who uses scratches, right? And even people that have different wheelchairs have different accessibility needs. So we need to move from an ADA compliant mindset into a more user-centric mindset that we provide the right information and reduce this uncertainty. ADA is the best regulation in accessibility and the most successful one, so we don't want to say that ADA is failing. It's about thinking about more the user's needs and the information that we can provide to users to travel with peace of mind. Let me give you some examples of how this can work. Around 47% of Wheel the World users, they consider bed height when deciding to book a room. And the segments are different. The 78% of people, they need a bed height that is between 20 to 23 inches, but an important segment that is around 15%, they need a bed height that is higher and bigger than 23 inches. So for this information is relevant, and we need to go into these details in order to make a good user-centric experience. Also with the type of bathing facilities. Let me give you this example. At Wheel the World, 72% of the users, they only need be able to book a room that has a rolling shower. Compared to that only 1%, they only need bathtubs. When it happens to the ADA, ADA requires hotels to have especially bathtubs in ADA rooms. Even small hotels, they are not required to have rolling showers, but yes, bathtubs. What happens that if we consider the request of our users combined, 98% of them, they can use a rolling shower, right? So this is about giving this information in detail because an ADA room, for example, can be compliant with a bathtub, and this will not work for 72% of this target audience. So what's important to tackle this challenge and this opportunity? Information, accessibility information. It needs to go into details. it needs to be precise, it needs to gather measurements, it needs to bring context with pictures and visual content, and it needs to share the context of the journey. It needs to be end to end to make people understand the full accessibility. Let me give you an example. You can have an amazing accessible room with a beautiful bathroom with rolling shower and every detail that can be considered. But if the access to that room is very hard to access, the room is very far from the lobby, and there's some stairs to access that, the accessibility is not there yet. So it's important to make it end to end. And most important to this information that we provide and we share needs to be trusted. Today, self-reported accessibility is not trusted by this audience, so third-party validations are important in order to achieve the trust of this information that we provide. Customer service is also important. Build knowledge and education for accurate customer service is important. You can train your staff. You can make them aware about the different needs of people with disabilities so they can be better prepared on receiving people with different disabilities in order to make them have a better experience and receive better guidance. And of course, once you raise this information in detail and you train your customer service, make all this information discoverable across digital channels. It's crucial to achieve this peace of mind with visual confirmations, as we mentioned, and also considering how this can be also be discoverable through AI, given that this is a trend that is growing every day about people using AI to plan their trips. So that's about how we can make sure that people have peace of mind traveling with all the information they have across digital channels by raising this information in detail and showcasing in the right way. And the last topic that we wanted to share about is how you can tell your accessibility story authentically as a destination or as an hospitality business. The first thing to consider, because you might be thinking, okay, my destination is not very accessible, so it's impossible for me to consider this and to showcase an accessible story when I do marketing and I plan my content and my marketing campaigns. And the fact is that every destination can have their accessibility story. At Will the World, we have made hundreds of people every year travel to most probably the most inaccessible place in the world, that is Machu Picchu. It's one of the most desirable travel destinations in the world. Beautiful place, I've been there, and it's inaccessible. But we have put together back in the day, this was around 8 years ago, the first travel experience that is accessible for people with different physical disabilities, understanding what are the accessible accommodations to stay, how to move around in the destination, and how to explore these specific different travel attractions with all the information the user needs in order to have an understanding on how they can enjoy this place. So if Machu Picchu has an accessibility story, your destination can also have one. And it's important to consider as well that content might be saturated across the travel industry, but not regarding accessibility. There's still an opportunity to continue generating content around accessibility. The fact is that only 2% of media features people with disabilities. So it's totally underrepresented. Many times it's not represented the right way. And that's why I showed this picture at the left of this lady in her wheelchair in the beach, making her wheelchair be touched by the ocean. No, there's none, not even one person that will allow their wheelchair to be inside the ocean and be exposed to the salt that the ocean has. Not only that, that's clearly a wheelchair that is used by hospitals. Current wheelchair users will never have a wheelchair that looks like that. So most probably that image has been generated through AI, and if it's not an AI, it's just a picture that is trying to represent something not by reality. On the right side, there's a picture of real people with real disabilities exploring the beach with beach wheelchairs. That is normally how people get into the ocean when they go to the beach. So there's still a great opportunity to generate real content about disabilities, about accessibility, to showcase and again, increase peace of mind and reduce uncertainty on travelers with disabilities. And how to make this happen? Focus on generating real accessibility marketing content. Guides, video content, photos, make sure they are showcasing real experience of real people traveling. Being transparent is better than being perfect. Non-destination is 100% accessible. And it's good to showcase also what are the some barriers or challenges that people might face so they can understand if they are okay by facing those barriers that the service can not have 100% accessible. And please consider this, avoid AI generate photos or videos. We have done some tests in our social media, and this segment will not trust on AI generated visual content, showcasing how they can experience a place. Also, prioritize acquisition channels with higher engagement. Baby boomers, older adults are on Facebook for travel planning. Travelers use Facebook communities to research accessible destinations, and you can use those communities in order to test out sentiment or possibilities in order what they think about accessibility in your destination. I'm showing here the the social media accounts of most probably the most recognized content creator for accessible travel. That is Corey Lee. That is a good friend of Wheel the World. We have done plenty of projects together. In the higher picture, I'm showing the number of followers that Corey Lee has on Instagram. In the lower one, that is around 60,000 people. On the lower one is the Facebook account of Corey Lee that has more than 100 followers. This is to showcase that many times we have to prioritize on those channels that this audience is using more. In this case, is Facebook. Lastly, it's important to build trust through partnerships and be consistent on your actions that you do. Build partnerships is important to do it with accessibility organizations from your local destination, and also accessibility focused organizations that have the credibility and they have the processes and the expertise in order to build the trust on your users. And also it's important to be consistent. As August said, this is important to be faced as a process, not a project. It's the same for content marketing regarding accessibility. If you do a specific project about generating content and about a few publications about accessibility of the destinations, that will not move the needle. This is important to be consistent and have a strategy on how you have to consider accessibility information and accessibility content through time, so this audience understand and realize that you are doing the right way regarding accessibility. So, as a wrap up, for conveying accessibility across digital channels, peace of mind comes from reliable, detailed, and trusted accessibility information. Build knowledge and education for accurate customer service so they can receive in a good way travelers with disabilities, and make this information discoverable across digital channels, yours and others as well. For telling your accessibility story authentically, every destination can have an accessibility story. Generate real accessibility marketing content, prioritize acquisition channels with higher engagement, and build trust through community, partnerships, and be consistent.
And recapping on what an aging or evolving demographic means for DMOs, this is a demographic that should be prioritized given their frequency of travel and travel spend. Additionally, it's important to provide information and content geared towards this demographic within your official DMO resources, as again, they are more likely to conduct their own travel research versus working with the travel agent, and 45.2% of the Boomer Plus traveler segment utilizes official DMO resources to plan their travel. In regard to making your own channels accessible, use the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines as your blueprint for digital accessibility. Remember that digital accessibility extends beyond just websites and also applies to social media platforms. And finally, digital accessibility should always be viewed as an ongoing initiative. It is a race without a finish line or a hike without a summit, if you will. Again, the slides from today's webinar and additional resources will be available on both the Miles Partnership and Wheel the World websites. And I think we paced this well, so we can open up the floor for Q&A.
August and Alvaro, quick question from Oscar in the chat. As a travel advisor, he'd love to know if there's a database of DMOs or DMCs that are certified or at least have a lot of experience with accessible travelers.
Yes, so DMOs you can check in our website, and you can see all the destinations that are verified by Wheel the World, and through wheeltheworld.com you can have details of more than 200 destinations with activities, attractions, transportation services, and also verified hotels where you can see detailed information about the accessibility. So, as a travel advisor, you can rely on wheeltheworld.com to help plan the trips for your clients.
Great. And one other question here from Jillian. Beyond ensuring our website is compliant with alt text and generating real accessibility marketing content, what additional steps can DMOs take next?
That's a great question. So to recap here, alt text is just a portion of digital accessibility. So for WCAG 2.2 AA conformance, there's 87 separate success criteria, with alt text just relating to like one or two of those success criteria. So I would encourage you to, use a scanning tool such as UsableNet, Site Improver, DQ to scan your website to see its current standings. And then you'll also have to engage in manual testing. So if you can do that in-house or work with a specialist, but have someone go through that relies on assistive technologies, such as a screen reader, to navigate through your website, and that'll allow you to pinpoint more complex accessibility issues that automated software like UsableNet, Site Improve, DQ, et cetera, is going to be unable to detect. So I know that sounds like a heavy lift. Any single time I talk to any DMO about digital accessibility, I encourage them to take a crawl, walk, run approach. And I think the easiest first step you can take, if you haven't already, is to create an accessibility statement on your website. Ultimately, it conveys your organization's commitment to digital accessibility, but more importantly, it provides contact information. So if a user does experience a barrier, they can reach out and gather the support they need. And typically, you have to list 3 separate contact methods. That'd be a phone number, email address, and postal address. So again, alt text is just a small portion of digital accessibility. It's important, but it's just a small portion of what would entail WCAG 2.2 AA conformance. And then that easy first step is to create an accessibility statement.
One question here from Jessica. It looks like it's for Alvaro. Jessica works for a tribal DMO in Arizona. Does Wheel the World currently work with any tribal or native communities? And she would love to know more about that partnership and what that looks like.
We do have experience working with native communities. Actually, one of our first projects was in the tiny island of Rapa Nui, that is Easter Island is also called, and we work there with the local native community that they're in charge of the national park, and we did a full um, raise of the accessibility information and work on designing different travel experiences with the local companies. And we are working also with DMOs in Arizona as well, so it would be great to explore working with others as well. No more questions?
Don't see any more questions.
I think I saw one about oh no, I'm not seeing another one.
We've got a question from Karen. It looks like just a general question for either you, August, or Alvaro. Um, Looking at forward moving with her career, how would you advise anyone to build um, a career in accessible travel?
That's a great question. I mean, I can take the first part of that, Alvaro, and then pass it over to you. I think a lot of DMOs are actually creating dedicated accessibility focused roles now. And the roles I've seen are typically a combination where it's physical accessibility and digital accessibility. So you can go on the DMO front, or you can also go more on the agency front. And Alvaro, I'll pass that over to you, as I'm sure you guys get a large number of applicants.
Yes, today there's several companies that are working towards accessible travel. It's not only Wheel the World to expand also and be more general. And at Wheel the World also we have always open like internship opportunities, and we guide people to learn more about this topic. We have actually also what we call the Wheel the World Academy. That is an online course for hospitality professionals on how to better serve guests with disabilities. So you can find also online at wheeltheworld.com for that resources, and you are more than invited to take that course.
Thank you. One question from Brandon. Alvaro, you mentioned Oregon became the first state with that Will the World partnership and marketing campaign. Has there been any other states that have followed?
Yes, we are working also as a state level with Colorado Tourism Office, and also with Michigan and Florida. Oregon is the first one that really cover all their regions and an important percentage of each of their partners inside those regions. And that's why it was the first one that got into that level of deepness on verifying accessibility information and showcasing to users. Colorado as well, and I would say both states have a history of accessibility and inclusion way before working with Wheel the World and incentivizing travel companies to consider accessibility and generating adaptive programs for the community. So I would say those have been at the forefront recently.
And then jumping in, Jillian, I know you had a question, or Lauren, my apologies. I know you had a question about looking at an example of an accessibility statement. I just provided you a link to the accessibility statement present on the Miles website, that I'm also sharing a link within the chat as well. So W3C, again, the organization that creates and maintains the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they have an accessibility statement like generator tool. It's very similar to like TurboTax, where you provide your information and then it auto-populates that. So that's a great reference, great jumping off point. And then bear in mind, you would then need to create a standalone page on your website, which houses that information from the accessibility statement. And typically that accessibility statement should be linked in like the footer next to like the privacy policy or terms and conditions. All right, is there any additional questions? If not, we can start, wrapping up. No? All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for your time today. I think this was a fantastic webinar. I did share my contact information in the chat if anyone has any additional questions, but the resources and this presentation will be available on both the Miles Partnership website and the Wheel the World website. So thank you, everyone, so much for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.